Start
So,
recording again, I guess.
we're-
All right.
Okay.
Recording. Part 2.
Yes, part.
Okay.
Next question. Why do you think that kids go into foster care, and what is the most common reason they go into foster care?
Well, what's the most common reason kids come into care? Hold on, I got someone wants to say hi real quick.
My car's not in your stock.
Elijah, called it. What's up, Elijah?
What's up?
All right, does my kid want to say hi? So kids, here's the thing. I thought that mostly kids would come into care because they were being abused, and that was, my expectation when I got this specific license to work for the agency. I wanted to do investigations, and I thought, I wanted to help kids who are being abused. Most kids come into care because of neglect. It's not kids who are being molested or being hit, but it's kids whose basic needs aren't being met. They don't have parents who are safe and have it together. To be kind of, I don't mean to be flippant about it, but that's more of the issue than kids who are actually being hurt. And a lot of times, if you look at, and it's not just being poor, like we don't just look for kids who are poor and take them away. Like poverty is not being neglectful. Poverty is not illegal. But when kids' needs aren't being met because parents are using drugs or using alcohol or have untreated mental health, then kids' needs aren't getting met, and that's the most common thing. And I'd say more to the point with that, it's drugs and alcohol are a huge. People who are drunk and high all the time can't be safe parents. And the younger a kid is, the more dangerous it is to have a parent who is drunk or high. Okay. Infants need every single bit of every need that they have, they need to be met by an adult, right? And so that's critical. You have people who aren't able to take care of themselves. Bad things happen to babies. When kids get older, it's called the inverse correlation. And so the older a child gets, the less vulnerable they are. And so we're constantly evaluating for that. So what might be unsafe, for a 2-month-old might not be an issue for a 12-year-old. And so we are always evaluating the vulnerability of the child and what is actually happening. But to answer your question, it's, abuse does happen. And sometimes it's abuse and neglect. But something that I didn't know when I got into this is it's usually neglect. And what I'll say, because I think it's interesting, so I'm going to tell you, I also thought that I was going to be helping a lot of kids who were in families where people were drug addicts and people were doing meth. I thought meth was going to be, let me tell you, alcohol is, from what I see, impacts way more families and way more kids. Why do you think that is?
Because when they're drunk, they're not in the right mindset. Like they're not all there all the time.
Absolutely.
Well,
Any idea what the bigger issue with alcohol is compared to other drugs? Any one of you?
Well, because when you're doing alcohol, doesn't it mess with your brain and just...
Wait, don't the parents get abusive? Like, is that
They
one of the
can.
reasons,
They can.
When they can get abusive?
Drugs and alcohol impair your judgment, and so you can't, you can't parent as good as you can. But if someone wants meth, can you go to 7-Eleven and buy meth?
Yeah, it's easier to get.
No, you can walk into any store and purchase alcohol. It's advertised on TV. It's everywhere. You live in Reno. This is a 24-hour town. You can get alcohol anytime. You can go into a casino. They'll give it to you for free. And so that's something that shocked me, is I thought it was going to be like crack and meth and all these. No, it's a problem, sure, and it's bad stuff, but alcohol impacts way more kids and families. And it's because it's socially acceptable. It's legal. You can get it. And we can tell, if people do a lot of drugs and sell meth, the police will eventually, they'll get arrested and go to jail. Like, it's against the law. Police don't step in. It's legal. And so, little known fact, alcohol is way more harmful than I would have thought.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
For that.
The next question is gonna be, so what would be the steps of getting adopted during foster care? I meant during COVID-19.
So, these very specific steps that you're referring to, because like I mentioned, it's a legal process. And so there's very specific, it's called NRS 124. It's Nevada Revised Statute 124, which is all the laws that outline what needs to happen for an adoption to finalize. And so an adoption through the agency, there's a few criteria that need to be in place. The family that's adopting needs to be licensed by us. And in order for someone to obtain a license, that means that we've done a very thorough background check, and we've obtained references, and we've made sure that they're safe. We've made sure that they're not, wanted for kidnapping in Missouri or, child exploitation in Stockton. Like, we look very closely at people to make sure that they're safe. We train. We give a lot of opportunities. I mean, it's not like an opportunity. Anyone who wants to work with us, like, you have to listen to me for 30 hours and learn about the kind of kids that we work with. And so you can do right by them. And so it's training, having a license. One of the criteria is before a child can be adopted, they have to be in that home for a minimum of 6 months. And so we want to make sure that things are good. We wouldn't want a family like, oh, we love these kids, and they move in and, oh, it's wonderful. And, let's finalize the adoption next week. And then, have a lot of time go by and they realize, oh, this, we don't want people to, change their mind. And so we make sure that kids are in a home for a minimum of 6 months. The family has to hire an attorney to draft a petition to go before a judge to make the adoption legal. In the meanwhile, kids still have contact with the agency. We don't, there's a lot of support. I mean, I feel like I'm missing a lot of stuff. And at the same time, there's a lot of oversight. We want to make sure that everything's cool, but also at the same time, it's like, but this is a family. Like, this is a family who, this isn't like a foster care arrangement. This is a family that wants to be a forever family together, and in which case we go away, right? And that's the idea, is once an adoption finalizes, social workers aren't involved anymore. The courts aren't involved anymore. And so we start to kind of back away to I like to let the family be a family. We don't need to be involved in every single little thing.
I just got scared by my own shadow.
So another one of my questions were, if you're in foster care and you get abused, what would most likely happen? And like, they basically threaten you not to tell anyone.
Well, that shouldn't be happening. And so one of the things that we do is, when we have a child or a youth, however, so we have kids and babies and such. And so one of the things that workers are always supposed to do is check in privately with kids and give them the opportunity to talk about, if something, uncool is happening, we want kids to let us know, because that way we can do something about it. If we don't know something is happening, then we can't react to that. And so when we do, it depends. I mean, it's, if it was something that was like really bad, say, we learned that foster parents were being physically abusive and then threatening kids, like, we would probably want to move those kids immediately so the abuse would stop. And then we would probably make sure that those people were not going to have access to more kids, so they couldn't abuse other kids. If it was something that was perhaps not as serious, but nonetheless, like, not cool, we would talk to the parents and say, hey, we're hearing that, I'm trying to think of an example of something that wouldn't be the biggest deal. You know, say for example, just 1 second. I'm so sorry.
That's all good.
I'm having trouble
With
uploading the first episode of the podcast.
What?
If that's not good.
No.
So if it was something to answer, if it was something that was like not child abuse, but something that would be violating someone's license, we would talk to them and say, hey, you know, like one of the things that we hear is like people want to say to a kid in foster care, like, oh, you were a brat today, you can't have dinner, right? Like that's something that's not abusive, but absolutely foster parents like can't withhold food from kids. And so we would talk to them. And so anything from having a conversation to, you know, removing kids and revoking their license. We always want to make sure that kids have access to safe adults. And so if there's something happening, then they can let someone know. And that's why we really want to have good relationships with the kids on our caseloads and make sure to check in with kids privately, because we understand that if the person who is not safe is sitting right there looking at you when you're trying to have a conversation with your social worker, it might be hard for you to open up. And so that's why, like, I would always use, when I would check in with kids, I would always say, hey, show me your room. And so that would be a natural segue to having a private conversation with the kid in their room away from anyone else. So they would have the opportunity to feel safe and disclose anything.
Does it usually take a long time to remove a child from like a foster home if they're not being treated correctly?
It depends. I mean, because if it's a youth who's in a foster home, that means we still have legal jurisdiction. And if we want to move a child, we don't have to really give an explanation. We're a legal guardian. We can move kids. We could show up on a moment's notice and say, hey, we're moving a child. We don't do that because it's horribly disruptive. It's not fair to kids. It's not fair to foster parents, but ultimately it's not complicated. We could do it whenever we wanted. It's when you want to remove a child from their biological home. That's what I was saying. Well, I mean, you get on the phone and you call a district judge and you get a warrant. And so we're able to have phone calls, just like we have on-call social workers, there's on-call judges in the family court division. And so our workers have access to them 24/7. And it happens regularly. There were 2 warrant calls this weekend. And so if we need to get jurisdiction, if something's happening, we don't just show up and, you know, knock on a family's door and say, hey, we heard, you know, someone's getting abused, we're taking your kid away. We don't do that. We call a judge and say, this is the evidence that we have. This is the concern. This is what we're seeing right now. Will you grant us a warrant to show up with law enforcement and say, you know, we are legally removing your custody, your children from your physical custody. And so it happens fast. I mean, we get a warrant in 20 minutes. It's a huge deal. I mean, we don't do that. The judges won't give it to us. Sometimes we'll call and ask for a warrant. The judge will say, no, that doesn't rise to the level where I'm going to give you permission to go take someone's kid. I mean, that's huge, right? And so that said, when we need it, we can get it very quickly, but it's not done unless it's very egregious circumstances.
Okay. So, I'm gonna jump in and answer or ask a question. That's fine.
Okay.
So, before I ask the question, I think only Ethan knows this, but I am adopted.
Okay.
Yeah. So, my parents are Luis and Jennifer Herbst. I was adopted when I was, I think, 1.
Locally?
And they said that it took a couple of years to get me adopted. So I'm wondering, what is the average process to get a kid adopted?
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Give me my pen. I appreciate you sharing that, and I think that's cool. It depends. Now, there are some people, and you mentioned your family waited a couple years,
Mhm.
and they adopted you when you were 2,
Yeah,
and
2 or 1.
so you probably don't remember that, right?
Hmm.
And it's interesting because, I said earlier I described an inverse correlation. Okay,
Yeah.
there's an inverse correlation between the age of a child a family wishes to adopt and how long they're going to wait. There are a lot of people who want to adopt babies. Okay. I don't recruit for many babies, but when I do, there are 30 people that I know very well off the top of my head who will, at a moment's notice, completely drop everything in their life to move forward and take a baby into their home because they want a baby. Okay. So that's fast. We have custody. We can have a baby moved into an identified adoptive home in like a week. Okay. Now, when we have kids in care who are older, the older a child gets, there are less people who are wishing to adopt. And so for some kids, like there was a question earlier about kids turning 18 and aging out. There are kids that we've been looking for years. And so it's not like a family is waiting, but the kid is waiting for us to find that family. And so it's hard because there are less people interested in adopting older kids. Now, I'm an adoptive parent myself, and the kids I adopted were older. And so, just case in point, not everyone is down or only exclusively wanting to adopt babies. There are a lot of really good people who understand that there's a need and is totally happy to adopt an older kid. A lot of people are, I think, scared because they just don't know. They hear about, especially you guys are teenagers, right?
Hmm.
You guys are all probably
Yes.
you're being real nice on this call right now, but you're probably all giant pains in the ass in real life to someone to one degree or another, right? A lot of people, hey, on the real, a lot of people don't want to deal with that. They want babies. So it can be everything in between. I really am proud when I can make a good match for an older kid. And one of the things that I think is cool with families who are interested in adoption with older kids is you know who you're getting, right? You kind of know their personality. You can have a conversation with an older kid. You know what they're about. With the baby, you never know. Like a baby could grow up and be a moron, or right? Your parents are lucky, obviously, right? And so that's one of the things when I talk with families is, yeah, babies are great, but you never know what you're going to get. With an older kid, they can tell you who they are. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Kevin? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I do have a follow-up question for you, and if you don't wish to answer, that's completely fine. But were you adopted locally, or were you adopted from somewhere else?
I was adopted locally.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And then my brother Brian was also adopted. I think he remembers his foster kid, but he's at work right now, so he's not currently here. But me and my brother were both adopted, and then my 2 sisters are led to my mom and dad.
Okay. Are your sisters older or younger than you?
Older.
Okay. A lot older?
One of them is 23. The other one is 25.
Okay. And that's a lot of families I work with. They have some of the best families I work with. In fact, they had kids and they really enjoyed being parents, and their kids got older and they still had that desire to be parents. And so that's cool families. And that's kind of a pattern that we see consistently is kids who get good matches with families who've already parented. And some people have never parented before, and they're rock solid. Ethan, do you keep changing your name on your thing?
No, that's me.
Okay,
No, the first time it was me, but Kevin just changed it.
I see.
And I just changed myself. So
Um, I don't think that's how you spell his name. Anyways, so uh, that's basically most of my questions. Does anyone else have any other questions?
yeah, I have a couple more.
I also do too. Actually, when kids are gonna get adopted, do they get a like ask like one of you guys like what they want in a parent, or like kind of like what they want to do?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if we're talking about a baby, then I can't really have that conversation, right? But I know
Obviously.
what I'm looking for. If I am trying to find an adoptive home for a 14-year-old, yeah, I'll have a conversation just like this and say, tell me what's important to you. Some kids are like, I ask questions like, some of the families who wish to adopt are it's two dads or two moms. And so that's something that I ask a kid, like, are you open to a family that it's a gay or lesbian couple? Are you open to a single parent family? Are you allergic to cats? Do you want to be adopted by a family who is Jewish? I mean, I'm just very open with having that kind of conversation, because I would not want to put a youth in a position that they were like, I don't want to waste anyone's time. And so I absolutely have conversations with kids about what's important to them. Now, some kids will be like, I want to live in a mansion, and I want a Porsche for my 16th birthday, and I want a Rolex, and an iPhone 15 and all this stuff. And that's not uncommon, but that's also kind of superficial. And so I'm going to say, by and large, most kids are pretty, when you get down to it, are like, just want, like, all of that other stuff is cool, but like, I just want a home where I'm loved and respected. And, that's, not to be all like, but like, that covers a lot. Like, who doesn't want that, right? Everything else is gravy. And so, but if a kid tells me that, they absolutely don't want to be in a home with pets, or, I listen to that. But most kids aren't very particular. They just want to be in a home where they're given unconditional positive regard, love, and respect.
Yeah,
And they deserve that. That's easy enough. They deserve that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like kids really shouldn't care where they live unless they're really picky and just want to be really spoiled. Like, I really don't care where I live as long as I'm loved and have people who care for me. As long as they love and care for me, I'm fine with living there.
Yeah, and that, I think most kids, when you get down to it, and so the other stuff is like, of course, nice, right? But that's I just, like, I'm very realistic with the families I work with. A lot of them have this idea of a perfect white baby boy is what they have expectations for, and I try and have them be very realistic about those expectations and the kind of family that they envision and what's closer to reality. And so I kind of have the same conversations with youth, and I want to know, but I also say, that's, I'll work on it. But bottom line is, I just want to make sure kids are safe and loved, and with people that aren't going to give up on them.
Sorry.
No, you can go.
All right. So if it's kind of like a stupid question, but if like, say that you go to foster care, right? Could your parents by chance take you back if you already got told that you were going to adopted, like from the court and everything, you're going to be adopted?
That there's so many what ifs to that. I don't know the best way to answer that.
Okay.
So if one of the things that has to happen for a youth to be adopted is they need to be free for adoption. And that happens by, it's an ugly word, but we have to terminate parental rights before we can let another family adopt. And so we call that TPR, termination of parental rights. And once a TPR has happened, they don't get undone. And you have to look at it from an agency perspective. If we have taken someone to court, we have the district attorneys who represents us, we have sought to terminate someone's rights, and we don't do that lightly. That means if we've done that, we have felt very strongly that it is in a child's best interest to do that. And so if we have undertaken that legal action, we wouldn't have done that if we thought that it was something that we would go back on. I don't, and I also kind of have an idea where you're coming from. And so I just want to be careful and respectful how I answer. And so it's not something that I've ever seen happen, because once rights have been terminated, it's like, well, if we thought that everything was cool and a kid could go back, then why would we have done that in the first place? And it's hard for kids because, and don't get it twisted, just because we terminate a parent's rights doesn't mean that parents ever stop loving their kids or that the kids ever stop loving their parents. And so there's certainly complexity to that. And it's not without some unique, struggles for the kids and the adoptive parents. But the answer to your question is we don't typically do that because I've never seen it done.
Okay. So
Miguel, what was your question?
I was gonna ask you, like, have you ever had those kids where they tell you they wanted to be in a family that have a lot of money, like just like kids like that?
I did have a conversation recently with the kid. He didn't outright say, I want to be adopted by a rich family. But when I was having a conversation with him, now granted, I've been able to speak with you guys for over an hour, right?
mm-hmm.
And like in Ethan's case, like I've known Ethan for a long, like I know him, like Ethan knows me. He knows, like it's very easy for me to have like a heartfelt, real conversation with Ethan. And frankly, we're having that kind of conversation now. Now, recently I was talking with a kid who I had only talked with one time before. And when he wasn't giving me a lot of information, right? And I could understand that it was probably awkward for him because I'm a grown man that he doesn't really know, asking him a lot of personal questions. And so he basically told me he just wants to make sure that any family will let him keep his girlfriend and buy him a PlayStation 5, which to me, I was like, man, that's real. That's pretty, like, I get it, but that's also like, I don't know. I really wanted him to come to the conclusion that, yeah, that kind of stuff's important, but like, I want a family that's going to treat me with like love and respect. And we didn't get there. And he very much was a challenge for me to do good advocacy for, because he wasn't saying much. And what he did say was pretty like, yeah, I just want to be able to, like, I want to be able to take my girlfriend in my room with the door closed, and I don't want them giving me any lip about it, and I want a PS5. And so I was like, and I understand that to get to a place for him to say, I want a family that's going to love me, and he probably wasn't comfortable having that conversation with me because he just met me. And so I get that. And so I won't, I won't judge too harshly, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. So I read an article, and it said that the numbers of parents doing drugs and getting their rights terminated from their kids have been going up since I think it was 2018.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 2018.
Yeah. So
I have that website bookmarked. I'll look at it right now.
Yeah. It is an article by Nielsen Susie, written July 15th, 2019. And it's titled "More Kids Are Getting Placed in Foster Care Because of Parents' Drug Use." And I think it's just a really touching article because I can relate to it, even though I don't remember it. I can relate to it. And that's why I was adopted, because my mom did drugs while I was still in her stomach, or just not even born yet. She was still doing drugs and smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol, and it really pulled on a heartstring right there because I relate to it.
Yeah. With my case, yeah, my mom and my dad were doing drugs. The house was dirty. Um, it was just really, it was just like, I was like really hurt knowing that my parents and my mom were doing drugs. Well, my parents were doing drugs. And it just really, really got me to thinking how bad drugs were, because I've seen what happened to them. Because before, even when I went to foster care, or even when they were doing drugs, the house was completely fine. We had an actual house. I actually had friends there, and just it just made me realize that drugs are bad, and I should never do them.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, so a couple things that I want to, if I may respond before we run out of time. So something that I worry about with kids who share like you're sharing is, one, don't ever judge yourselves. And I know it's like easy for me to say, and especially Kevin might be like, whatever, dude. But I see sometimes kids, it messes with their self-esteem and their idea about themselves because of choices that their parents made. And so you're not your parents. You, especially at the ages you are now, you are very much driving the bus at this point. And so don't linger on or judge yourself or have any less standards, or it's called your ego. Okay. And don't have a bruised ego or think lesser of yourself because of things your parents have done. Okay. That's for what it's worth. I know it's easy for me to say and just talk about it, and I understand that that's not the case. Okay. You don't have to, you don't have to make the same choices. Okay. I also, since you mentioned a study or some statistics, look at the Casey Family Foundation, CASEY. There is a ton of really good, totally free, accessible research that has to do with all this kind of stuff. And that I know when I was at the university getting my degree, for like pretty much every paper I wrote, I had like something from Casey Family Studies in there. And so if you haven't already found it, it's legit stuff. And it's easy to read. A lot of times when you find articles with statistics and stuff, it's not really readable. Doesn't make sense. The Casey stuff is easy to read. So check that out if you want.
I'm looking at that right now.
One more question. Also, now, did you guys get stuck together for this group assignment, or are you guys actually friends?
We are actually friends.
Yeah, we're actually friends. But,
Yeah.
Wait, Miguel didn't say anything. Miguel, do you play in these schools?
I mean, I like, to be honest, like I knew them. I never really talked to them, but because of this project, I do consider them friends. They're really good people.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. And the fact that you guys are, I mean, actually, I'm assuming that you took the time to sit and listen to me, that you actually do care and are interested in this subject. And so that's cool. I didn't even know, when I was your age, I wasn't aware that there was such a thing as a foster home. I didn't know. I thought adoption was something you saw. I had no clue that this was something that was a reality for people. And so the fact that you guys are asking these questions, I think, is cool. And I respect that. And I wish you guys luck.
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of hard, like dealing with foster care. You really think that it's not gonna be bad. Like, it's gonna be perfectly fine. But once you start getting taken away from them, and you start missing your family, it kind of gets worse. Well, that's how it was for me, anyways. I can't speak for anyone else. I can just speak for me. And it really got me to a situation where, when I was first taken away, of course, when I was really missing my dad, and like I couldn't sleep at all that night. It just really messed me up. That
It's traumatizing. That's kind of the double-edged sword of what we do. Is we don't get involved when things are cool in families, right? And so if we get involved, that means that stuff wasn't going good. That said, like, we know that when we take kids away, that it's traumatizing for the kids and for parents. And so it's why we really work hard not to, if there's any way possible that we can't, because just like you shared, even when the intentions are good and all possible circumstances are as good as can be, it still sucks. And it's for what it's worth, we recognize that, and we do the best that we can to, the word is mitigate, which means make it not as bad as possible. So we do everything we can to mitigate the impact, but like, we know it's rough on kids.
Yeah.
If there's if there's like ever a situation where it's like a brother and sister getting put into foster care, has there ever been like where they get split apart and like put in like different homes or something?
There are times that that's happened. That's a good question. And yeah, unfortunately, there are times that that's happened. We, as an agency, we do everything we can to keep that from happening, because like I just said, kids getting removed is a trauma. And then to get split from their brother or sister is an additional trauma. And so we really do everything we can to keep siblings together. But sometimes we can't. Sometimes we have to, we've removed, 5 kids at a time, and to find a foster home to take 5 kids at once. So we're about to run out of time, and I've got things to do. So what I'm going to say in closing is this: I appreciate you guys. Ethan, let me know what you guys get for your grade. Okay. You guys better get an A.
Okay.
And also, be careful. Hey,
Chris,
there is a video, if you're interested, since we're talking about removals, there's a video on YouTube called Removed, and it is like 12 minutes, and it's like a dramatization of a CPS removal. Watch it with care. Watch it with your parents. It is rough. I show it to people all the time. They usually cry. It's brutal, but I think it's would be a valuable experience for what you guys are learning about now. So it's called Removed. It's about a little girl named Zoe, and it's on YouTube.
Okay. Chris,
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you. And have a good rest of your night.
Yeah, you too. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miguel and Kevin, Ethan.
Thank
we'll
you.
be talking soon.
Pleasure to meet
Chris,
you
if
too.
you need me, Chris, you can call me.
Thank you, Mitch.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Princess, thank you.
Good luck, guys.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Okay, that is going to end it for the second part of the podcast.
Share the video with me on Outlook.
Okay.
Dude, that was crazy.
Yeah. If you do watch this podcast, thank you for learning about foster care. And if you are older, consider about adopting a child or taking kids into foster care.